Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Ahmad, as Al said, from Peakon. We are an employee engagement analytics provider. Now, I'm here to talk to you about the employee voice report that we recently released, where we analyzed over 11 million comments from employee feedback. Now, typically with an employee survey, you might get some data and some numbers, right? And you might ask yourself, okay, well, is a 6 better than a 5? Is an 8 better than a 6? And then, let's compare it to a benchmark in the top quartile. And really, that can be very troublesome. And you don't really know what to compare that to. But when you look at comments and the amount of rich insight and data that is inside of a comment, it is far, far more valuable than just the number. And so that's exactly what we did. So in this data study, as I mentioned, we analyzed over 11 million comments across 160 countries. Now, our current data set as of today consists of 81.5 million data points and 16.5 million comments across 160 countries. But obviously, when we did this report, it was 11 million. So I'm not showing you this for the actual size of this number, but the ratio of comments to data points that we're collecting, right? 20% of the time, an employee is leaving a comment with their employee survey and when they're responding to a question. So lots of insights that can come from it. So 3 things I want to cover with you today is what are people talking about, why are they talking, and are they being listened to? So the first question, what are they talking about? Within Peakon, we ask a question, if you had a magic wand, what's one thing you would change within your organization? And very, very logical. What we find, there was a lot of financial themes that came through, a lot of themes around relationship, both for management and staff. But communication was one that was really, really put out there as well, right? We find that an effective communication strategy has a direct correlation and impact on employee engagement and a sense of belonging within your organization, which is really, really important. Now, the most common question that we get is, how do we engage new starters? And so when we look at the comments that are coming through from new starters, we find there's a lot of themes around, a lot of comments around, new people, chatting to new people, new starters, training sessions, atmosphere of the organization, right? And you notice they're scoring very high, and they're 4 or 5 times likely to include these keywords. But then we also understand that the employee changes over time, right? That employee experience changes over time. So when we start looking at 2 years beyond, we can see it's a totally different set of themes. There's themes around salary that are coming through, development, and potential leadership roles, right? So these are very logical things that we can now take and start implementing to help prevent attrition, for example, right? We understand that employees that are with your organization longer are more valuable, right? They've gained that experience. We don't want to lose them. So what can we focus on to improve that kind of 2 to 5 year mark there? Now, comments and topics can give you context that numbers and metrics alone can't, and I think that is key. Now, when you're looking at the generational differences across all these comments, we know that the boomer generation is twice as more likely to talk about remuneration than millennials, right? We've got millennials talking about salary, for example. But also millennials, they're part of that mobile phone era. So they're also more likely to use smiley faces at the end of their comments as well, which is really interesting. But Gen Z, we find, with Gen Z, it's actually more self-referential comments. They're talking about themselves, I have, I am, the vibe of the organization, right? So for example, somebody from the boomer millennial generation might say, hey, well, the remuneration package isn't what I expected. Whereas somebody from the Gen Z might say, I am unhappy with this. This is not what I expected. I would like to see change, right? So it's really about them. Now, it's interesting because what we find is you want to use the same language when talking with these organizations. So if you can mirror that language, we find that it's more impactful and can resonate in a more personal way with these generations. So if you use that same language with these various generations, it makes it more effective. Now, what brings all these generations together? We find talking about work-life balance, right? My family, my people, part-time work, flexibility, life balance, hours. Very, very common themes that are coming across here. But then you look at something that's standing out here. Hopefully you guys have all picked it up. Gen Z is talking about plastic, right? The rise of the importance of plastic and social causes for this Gen Z generation is really, really important. And if your organization isn't putting any kind of sustainability initiatives into place, then you're likely going to have some issues going on in the future with this generation. Because the lines between professional and personal are becoming increasingly blurred, right? So what we find is, employees nowadays, they're looking at the values of your organization, the mission of your organization, and they're picking and choosing who they want to work for based on that. So something like sustainability is important to the Gen Z generation. Now, why are employees speaking up? We find that employees that are unhappy are twice as more likely to leave a comment than employees that are more neutral. So you're looking at, let's say, 7 or 8 there, right? So they're giving their feedback. They want to be heard. And when employees speak up, it's likely a warning sign that something is troubling them. And we need to deep dive into that data and figure out what we can do to help them out. So the next question is, are employees being listened to? Now, what we find is in ANZ, employees are 37% more likely to leave a comment in their survey than people in North America and Europe. But on the contrary, the employer response rate is 11%, right? So 1 in 3 of those employees are actually being responded to, versus a more kind of, consistent approach in North America, where 1 in 5 employees are leaving a response and 1 in 5 of them are being responded to in their surveys. But then you look at industry, right? We look at government, energy, manufacturing industries, right? People that are usually not office-based, they're probably not sitting at a desk. Really high commentary. They're giving all their feedback. But when you look at the employee response rates, very, very low. It's like they feel like as if their feedback is being fallen on deaf ears. But then you look at the technology industry, professional services industry, you look at finance, right? These are your typical desk-based staff. There's a more consistent approach in terms of employee response right here, and interacting and giving feedback based on the feedback that they receive. So based on this data study that we've done, we found that 65% of employees feel unheard by their employer. But also what I'm here to say to you is there is no magic required. There's no magic wand. Everything that people aren't asking for unicorns and butterflies. These are very logical things that people are asking and wanting within their organization. And we're happy to share this report with you in more detail. It's actually live on our Heartbeat website, which is our thought leadership arm. So you just go to heartbeat.peakon.com and you actually download the full report and have a read. Or you can also come by our booth down in the exhibition space, and happy to chat about it with you further. But thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.